Ford. 120 years of hidden decisions that changed the world forever.
Henry Ford's early story feels almost like a parable. Boyhood on a Michigan farm, an instinctive suspicion that the world could be made more mobile, and a hands-on curiosity that would not rest. Born in 1863 in Greenfield Township, he was raised in a landscape where every tool had a purpose, and every machine was judged by usefulness, not glamour. That environment gave him an unusual education, one not taught in schools but learned in the rhythm of seasons and the language of gears. He dismantled and reassembled clocks and engines not from an abstract pursuit of technical mastery, but because he wanted to understand motion, how to create it, how to control it, how to make it safe and ordinary. As he moved to Detroit and worked at the Edison Illuminating Company, Henry observed another transformation, cities becoming organized by electricity, timelines disciplined by predictable power. The notion that mechanical systems could rearrange daily life stayed with him. He imagined vehicles not as toys for the wealthy, but as practical instruments that could connect people to opportunities farther than a cart or horse could take them. For Henry, it was moral as much as mechanical. Mobility meant access to jobs, markets, and communities. It meant dignity. He began experimenting in small shops with parts scavenged from bicycles and engines. Each failure refined his intent. The quadricycle that would later rumble through Detroit was not an aesthetic triumph, but a manifesto, proof of concept that a self-propelled machine could be tamed and made useful. The farm boy's dream was therefore not a single invention, but a long apprenticeship, learning to see the world as an assemblage of flows that a well-designed machine could join and reorder. The quadricycle was crude. Bicycle wheels, a simple frame, a gasoline engine that coughed and coughed until it obeyed. Yet when Henry rolled that first machine down Detroit streets in 1896, its imperfect motion reframed possibility for him and everyone who saw it. That rickety ride was not a business model. It was a challenge issued to the future. He tried to organize that future through companies that failed. First, the Detroit Automobile Company, then the Henry Ford Company. Each collapsed, teaching hard lessons on finance, management, and compromise. Investors wanted spectacle. Henry wanted utility. He learned the hard arithmetic of production. The best idea must be coupled with replicable processes and reliable parts. The early failures taught him an almost religious devotion to simplification. Interchangeability, ease of repair, and minimal moving parts became doctrinal rather than incidental. Those principles would later make the Model T possible not merely as an invention, but as a social technology. Between missteps, he persisted, building prototypes, courting backers, and honing a vision that was stubbornly democratic. If a car could be made cheap enough and durable enough, it would cease to be a luxury and become infrastructure. That conviction hardened into method. The quadricycle's jitter and sputter remained in Henry's mind, not as embarrassment, but as calibration. He now knew the precise edges where invention met industry. On June 16, 1903, with $28,000 and 11 investors, the Ford Motor Company was founded in a modest Mack Avenue building. The Model A that emerged from those cramped rooms was not designed to dazzle, it was designed to endure. Early buyers were practical folk. Merchants who needed reliable transport, farmers who preferred a machine that could handle mud and ruts, craftsmen who could not waste time on constant repairs. Word of mouth moved faster than any advertisement. Yet the novelty of mass demand revealed organizational gaps. Parts arrived late, skilled hands were scarce, and small bottlenecks in assembly made scaling precarious. Ford and his team responded by codifying work, documenting tasks, simplifying sub-assemblies, and tolerancing parts so that a bolt from one batch would fit into another. These small steps added up. By standardizing, Ford transformed craft into a repeatable process. While the company was no stranger to heat and failure, it also cultivated a culture of relentless iteration. The goal wasn't to produce the fanciest car on the road. It was to make the most useful car at the lowest honest price. That focus on value over prestige set Ford apart from rivals who chased luxury or novelty. The Model A thus became a tool of social change. More than transportation, it was a means for ordinary people to expand the radius of daily life. The Model T, introduced in 1908, was less a single car than a compact philosophy: durability, simplicity, and affordability. Its vanadium steel frame could take the shocks of dirt roads, its straightforward engine could be fixed with simple tools. Its parts were designed for interchangeability. Where prior cars required skilled artisans for repair, the Model T invited the practical owner, farmers, teachers, small business people, to become mechanics by necessity and by habit. Public response was ferocious. Demand outpaced supply, and Ford faced not just engineering problems but sociological ones: how to produce quickly enough without sacrificing the qualities that made the car valuable. Those pressures drove experimentation with production flow, parts, logistics, and worker organization. The Model T's practicality made it integral to rural electrification, mail delivery, and the expansion of suburban life. Americans who had been tethered by distance suddenly found choices: where to work, what to buy, how to visit, whom to marry. The Model T was thus an engine of social transformation as much as mechanical innovation. Its ubiquity rewired landscapes and expectations. In communities across continents, it became the instrument by which modern life, schools, markets, leisure, remapped itself around increased mobility. When the moving assembly line debuted in 1913, it did not feel like a single invention born overnight. Instead, it felt like the culmination of every frustration Ford had endured since the quadricycle days. Bottlenecks, wasted motion, parts that arrived late, workers forced to search for tools, machines waiting for men instead of the other way around. Henry Ford believed that if work could be organized like the flow of electricity, labor could become both faster and less exhausting. The idea was simple but radical: bring the work to the worker, not the worker to the work. The first trials were chaotic. Parts fell off hooks, processes jammed, timing was off, and the experiment threatened to collapse. But Ford's engineers refined it relentlessly, adjusting the speed of conveyors, rearranging tasks, standardizing every bolt and bracket, and training workers in a rhythm that matched the line's steady movement. Once the system clicked into place, the results were astonishing. Assembly time for a Model T dropped from more than 12 hours to just 93 minutes. For the first time, automobiles became not the privilege of the elite but the expectation of the average family. Productivity soared, costs dropped, and Ford reduced the price of the Model T again and again. But the assembly line changed more than manufacturing. It altered the psychology of work. Jobs became specialized, predictable, and synchronized. Each worker contributed a crucial step in a vast mechanical choreography. The factory became a literal engine of modern life, capable of producing mobility at a scale the world had never imagined. The moving assembly line also attracted global attention. Visitors from Europe, Asia, and South America came to study this new industrial rhythm. Some praised it as a miracle of efficiency, others criticized it as the mechanization of human labor. Yet its impact was indisputable. It defined the tempo of the 20th century and forged the economic foundation of a motorized world. In 1914, Ford shocked the world with an announcement that seemed impossible for its time: a minimum wage of $5 per day, more than double the prevailing rate, and a reduction in the workday from 9 hours to 8. The news spread across America like wildfire. Thousands of men lined up outside Ford's Highland Park plant in the cold, some arriving before dawn, hoping for a chance at a job that offered not just a paycheck but a new kind of stability. For Henry Ford, however, the decision was not charity, it was strategy. The moving assembly line had created unprecedented output, but it also created high worker turnover. The repetitive nature of the tasks was exhausting, and many employees quit before they mastered their stations. Ford understood that efficiency demanded continuity. To keep the line flowing, he needed workers who felt secure, respected, and motivated. The $5 day became a contract between company and worker. Ford would offer wages that allowed a decent life, and workers would commit to the discipline of the line. This policy transformed the social landscape. Workers could now afford the very product they were building. Families that had never dreamed of owning a car suddenly saw the Model T as attainable. The wage increase pulled thousands into the middle class, influencing labor standards across industries. Newspapers debated whether Ford was a genius or a reckless idealist, but the outcome spoke for itself. Productivity rose, turnover fell, and Ford's workforce became a symbol of industrial modernity. Yet the $5 day had strings attached. Ford's sociological department monitored employees, assessing their personal habits, living conditions, and financial discipline. The program blended paternalism with pragmatism, an attempt to cultivate reliability through lifestyle guidance. Though controversial, it reflected Ford's conviction that economic mobility required not only wages but structure. The policy's legacy endures. It demonstrated that fair pay and mass production could reinforce each other, proving that a modern industrial economy could be both profitable and socially transformative. As the world slipped into global conflict, Ford found itself confronting a new reality, one in which assembly lines would shift from civilian mobility to military necessity. Even before the United States officially entered World War II, Ford had begun preparing for the transition. When Pearl Harbor was attacked in 1941, the company converted its plants with astonishing speed, channeling its industrial might toward the defense effort. The most iconic symbol of this shift was the Willow Run plant in Michigan, an enormous facility designed to produce the B-24 Liberator bomber. The scale was unprecedented. Over a mile long, outfitted with nearly mile-wide assembly lines and staffed by tens of thousands of workers, including women who joined the industrial workforce in record numbers. Skeptics laughed when Ford claimed it could mass-produce bombers the way it mass-produced Model Ts, but Willow Run proved them wrong, eventually producing one completed bomber every 63 minutes. Ford also built military trucks, engines, aircraft components, and Jeeps, transforming its factories into the nervous system of wartime logistics. The same principles that had fueled the rise of the Model T, interchangeability, simplification, and synchronized flow, now supported the Allied war machine. The factories became a demonstration of America's industrial resolve, showing that democracy could mobilize at a scale once thought possible only in authoritarian regimes. The war years reshaped Ford's identity. The company was no longer simply a manufacturer of affordable cars. It was a strategic asset, a symbol of national capability. Workers felt a sense of mission larger than profit. And when the war ended, the Ford brand emerged not weakened by disruption, but strengthened by its technological and organizational achievements. When World War II ended, Ford faced a world that wanted to move again. Not in convoys or bomber formations, but in families, in neighborhoods, in the daily hum of rebuilding. Soldiers returned home seeking normalcy, and the automobile became a symbol of regained freedom. Ford stepped into this moment, carrying both the confidence of wartime achievement and the anxiety of rapid cultural change. Competitors like GM had spent the war refining design and consumer research, while Ford had focused almost entirely on military production. The company entered the post-war market needing not just new cars, but a new identity. The 1949 Ford became the company's reset button. Sleek, low-slung, and modern-looking, it abandoned pre-war styling and signaled that Ford understood the mood of the era: optimistic, suburban, forward-leaning. Highways stretched across America, new suburbs bloomed, and families wanted cars that told a story about progress. Ford responded with innovations in automatic transmissions, chassis design, and safety testing. The company's marketing shifted too, emphasizing convenience and elegance instead of raw mechanical toughness. At the same time, Ford confronted internal transitions. Henry Ford II, inheriting a company weakened by wartime financial strain, recruited a team of brilliant young managers, known as the Whiz Kids. They introduced modern accounting, management systems, and strategic planning, pulling Ford from the shadow of its more chaotic early decades. Under their influence, Ford began to behave not like a single inventor's workshop, but like a modern corporation capable of competing on global terms. The era wasn't without missteps. Models like the Edsel became infamous disappointments, but even failures sharpened Ford's understanding of consumer psychology. What Americans wanted was shifting. Style mattered, comfort mattered, aspiration mattered. And Ford gradually learned to speak this new language. By the early 1960s, America's youth culture was exploding. Teenagers and young adults were no longer passive consumers. They were trendmakers with tastes of their own. The country was restless, ambitious, and craving expression. Ford sensed that the automobile could become a symbol of identity, not just transportation. Out of this cultural moment emerged one of the most iconic cars ever built, the Ford Mustang. When the Mustang launched in 1964 at the New York World's Fair, it ignited a phenomenon. Affordable, stylish, sporty, and endlessly customizable, It attracted buyers who had never before considered buying a new car. Ford predicted modest sales. Instead, it sold more than 1 million Mustangs within 18 months. The car starred in films, television, and songs. It wasn't merely a vehicle, it was a cultural event. For the first time, Ford had captured the emotional center of the American imagination. Meanwhile, performance divisions were pushing limits. In Dearborn and on racetracks around the world, Ford engineers raced against the best, including Ferrari. The rivalry culminated in Ford's legendary victory at Le Mans in 1966, where the GT40 ended Ferrari's dominance and established Ford as a global performance powerhouse. The win was more than engineering. It was drama, narrative, a moment when Ford proved that American determination and industrial ingenuity could triumph on the world stage. But the era was complicated. The oil crisis of the 1970s redefined consumer expectations again. Fuel economy became critical, environmental concerns gained prominence, and muscle cars fell under scrutiny. Ford had to pivot quickly, creating smaller, more efficient vehicles, while preserving the emotional appeal that had made the Mustang a legend. This period taught Ford that the market could change overnight. Success was not permanent. It had to be renewed constantly through innovation and cultural awareness. In meeting these challenges, Ford cemented its status not only as a maker of cars, but as a maker of icons. The 21st century confronted Ford with challenges more complex than any it had faced before. Globalization, economic shocks, environmental pressure, digital disruption, and the rise of electric vehicles. Yet it also offered an opportunity to rediscover the company's original purpose: democratizing mobility. The restructuring of the 2000s forced Ford to examine its identity with clear eyes. While competitors relied on government bailouts during the financial crisis, Ford made the difficult decision to mortgage assets, streamline operations, and bet on engineering revival. It survived not through rescue, but through reinvention. Under leaders who embraced design and efficiency, Ford introduced vehicles that restored public confidence, especially the reborn Mustang, the F-150 series, and a suite of technologically enhanced SUVs. But the bigger transformation was philosophical. Ford recognized that the future of mobility would revolve around software, electrification, autonomous systems, and sustainability. The company invested heavily in battery development, digital interfaces, and advanced manufacturing, while rethinking what a car company could be. The launch of the Mustang Mach-E symbolized this turning point, an electric vehicle carrying the badge of one of Ford's most sacred icons. It represented continuity and evolution, a bridge between heritage and future. The all-electric F-150 Lightning pushed this even further, electrifying America's best-selling vehicle and signaling that EVs were no longer niche alternatives, but mainstream tools ready for real work. Global markets changed too. Ford expanded its presence in China, strengthened operations in Europe, and reasserted itself in North America as a leader in trucks and utility vehicles. The company embraced digital services, over-the-air updates, and connected car ecosystems, moving closer to the world of technology firms. Today, Ford stands at a familiar crossroads, much like Henry Ford did more than a century ago, facing a world reshaped by energy transitions, new mobility expectations, and rapid innovation. But the story is the same at its core: mobility for everyone, driven by practical engineering and bold decisions.